Hey, hello friends, welcome to my channel. In this Python commonly asked coding interview question series, today let's discuss about how to read contents of a text file using Python. Alright, so this is not a very traditional question that we have been discussing in our playlist earlier. Okay, this question is very unique. The reason I have covered this question here in this playlist is because this topic is very popular in recent times, and it has been asked in coding in interviews very frequently. Okay, with the popularity of the data, the way you work with files has been very important. And whenever the concept of file handling comes, how do you work with files has become very important concept for every Python programmer to understand. All right, so how do you read files, how do you write files, append files, basically how do you play with files has become very important. So whenever the concept of file handling comes, the very first thing that you need to know is how do you read a content of a file. Okay, that's a very basic thing for a Python programmer to understand. So that's why if an interviewer want to test your concept or your understanding on file handling, you can definitely expect this question. They will even ask you to write syntax or write a piece of code about how do you read a text file or how do you read a CSV file and all. So that's why I really felt this question is very important for every Python programmer to understand. So here it is. Let's see how we can solve this. All right. So there are many ways in which you can read a text file. Okay, so there are many inbuilt functions like open, read line, read, file input. Do not worry, we'll discuss about everything one by one in detail. Okay, so very first thing what we are gonna do is we are gonna use with open. Okay, with is generally used for exception handling. Okay, so it is generally used to write cleaner code. That's why I've used with. Open is open method. You can provide the file path. Okay, so open method is generally used to open a file, right? You can see the autocomplete which shows your file as the parameter, right? So all you need to do is just provide the parameter here, parameter of file path. Okay, so what is our file path? So I have, for demo purpose, I have created a sample file here in this particular folder, Python beginner tutorials. I have created a file called Python introduction, where I have copied few contents of related to Python from Wikipedia. Okay, so this is the content that we are planning to read and display in our console. Okay, so let's see, let's provide this path. Okay, and here it is. Let's provide the file name as well. File name is python introduction dot text. Right. Okay, I need to provide double slash, right? Right, I need to provide an alias as well as f. And then what we need to do is, all we need to do is read the contents of the file, right? So we have a method called file read. Okay, f is my alias, right? So I'm using that here, f dot read. If we need to print this, we'll save it under a variable called lines for now, and I will print this, print lines. So what this read method will do is, it will just plainly read the contents of the file from the very beginning to the very end and return it as a string. Okay, so let me run and show this. Yeah, you can see this is the content I add in my file. Everything was read from the file and it is printed in my console. Okay, so this is a very basic way of using read method. Okay, this is the very first step you need to understand, and then you can provide few parameters like size as well. Like you can provide the number of characters up to which it need to read. Okay, for example, if I give 10 as my parameter, so it will read up to 10 characters. Okay, it printed only up to 10 characters. If I have to read up to say 50, it will only read 50 characters. Okay, so this is another additional thing you have in read method. Okay, so this is the very basic or very first step you need to understand whenever you want to read file. Okay, and then we have something called read line. Okay, this read line method will just read very first line. If I run this, you can see it read very first line from my file. It did not read anything else, it just read my first line of the file. Okay, so if at all you need to read only first line, because generally why you have this method is generally when you work with files, right, the very first file will be your header. Okay, so there will be a lot of situation where you have to fetch your header and place it somewhere, and you need to make it as a column names and all, right? So in those kind of situation you can use this read line, which will be very helpful. Okay, so this is how you will use read line method. And next we have something called read lines. Okay, as the name indicates, it will read every line from the very beginning to the end. And the only difference between read and read lines is read will return a string, whereas read lines will return a list of strings. If you look at the output, you can see it is covered within square brackets, which indicates it returns a list of string. Okay, that's the only difference between read method and read lines method. Alright, so this is something very important to note. Okay, you can use anything based upon the situation you are put upon. I would generally recommend using read lines, because read lines will be very helpful for you to iterate through each and every item, whenever you are working with larger files, right? This read lines method will be very helpful instead of read. Okay, if you want to print this line by line, okay, so when we run this read lines, it returned me only a list of strings, right? It in a single line like this, right? If I have to print it like more readable, if my output has to be more readable, what I can do is I can use this read lines method in a for loop kind of way. Okay, so I will write a piece of code. You can write something like print line for line in f dot read lines, right? So what I've done is I've left the same line from my previous example where we are just opening the file. Okay, and here what I'm doing is I'm just printing line by line. I'm using a for loop to go through each and every line from my read lines method. So what this will do is it will go through each and every line and print it. That's all what I'm doing here. Okay, it's very simple. It might look confusing, but it's very easy. Now, all you're doing is looping through each and every line in your file and then just printing it. Okay, now if I run this, you can see it printed everything. It printed line by line, right? So this is another best way of using read lines. This will be more readable. Okay, if you notice, there is a lot of gap between this lines, right? The reason is because whenever it comes to next line, right, it adds a new line character, right? So that's why it is showing the space, lot of space. So if you have to make this more readable, what you can do is all you need to do is just use line.strip. There's a strip method which will remove the empty spaces for you. Now it looks more readable now, right? Earlier we had a lot of spaces, empty spaces. Now it is more readable. Okay, you can use this strip method, which will be very handy whenever you work with real-time programming. Okay, so there's another way also. Okay, if there is another way, I will show you another way of reading a file line by line. Okay, this is also very useful one. You can, this is something I am letting you know for the knowledge purpose only, but this read lines method will be very, this will be more than enough for you to work with files. Okay, so I'm just using a traditional for loop kind of thing for line in f. All I'm doing is print line. Okay, since I have to strip the empty line, I'm just using the strip method. Now if I run this, you can see it throwed me the same output. Okay, it's something very similar to the previous example, but again this is another way of working with files. Like this is another way of reading files and printing it. Okay, and then another thing that I wanted to share with you is because whenever you present this like kind of coding in interviews, right, if you give a lot of details, interviewer will be very much impressed. Okay, for example, I gave you a strip method. Okay, so whenever you use this kind of method, interviewer will be really impressed, because as a programmer you are trying to improve each and every line of code that you are writing, right, from an efficiency point of view, and also from the readability point of view, right? So in case if you want to add more details as well, right, you can provide some encoding as well, right? So until now what we did is we just read ASCII files, right? So all add ASCII values, so it you do not need to provide any encoding. But for example, if you are working with any other language files, for say you are working with Japanese, or you are working with Chinese files and language and all, generally it will be in UTF-8 code. So in those kind of situation you need to provide a parameter called UTF-8 encoding equal to your format. Okay, so in those kind of situation, if you try to read, it will work very smoothly. Okay, so whereas if you have not provided this encoding whenever you work with different kind of language files where ASCII is not used, this will not work. But this is another parameter, it will give you the same output because I have not changed the file, but this is something I have given you for knowledge purpose, so you can provide this information as well, so that interviewer will be really impressed, knowing that you are concerned about each and every small details during file handling. Okay, and another thing I forgot to inform is you can provide the read mode, the mode in which you are using this file. Okay, here I am just focusing on only reading the content of the file. I am not focusing on writing or appending anything to it, so I am just providing read. By default it is on read mode only, so you don't have to provide any parameter, but whenever you work with write mode and all, you have to provide that parameter called w or something like that. Okay, so this is something I wanted to cover. And what else? Yeah, and finally very important thing is closing the file. Okay, so lot of people forget to close that file, so all you need to do is f dot close. Okay, again this is another detail that interviewer will be impressed with. The reason is because whenever you work with files, right, say you are reading files from servers and all, in order to have it more memory efficient and all, it is always a best practice to close the files that you are working with. Okay, so you can use this dot close, the close method, which will actually close your file. The reason I'm emphasizing on this is because I have faced this issue in my real-time projects and all. In a lot of situations I forgot to close this file. As a result, it will be consuming a lot of memory, and my files are left open. Sometimes whenever you try to write or change anything to that files, it might create some problems. So it is really very important for you. This will look like very basic step and very easy to, but a lot of time we forget it. So I really emphasize you to follow this close method once you have done with all your coding. All right, so this is something I just wanted to cover. And yeah, I think this is what I want to cover as part of the very basic file operation method. Okay, but I'm coming to the very important concept. Okay, the very important concept what I wanted to cover is, because the interviewer will be very much impressed if you give this question, give this answer for file handling, for file reading and all. Okay, so until now we worked with only single files. What if we are working with multiple files? Okay, in real time situations you will be put in a situation where you have to work with multiple files. Okay, so whenever you are working with multiple files, so that's when your efficiency comes into picture. Okay, so how efficiently are you trying to read multiple files? Because and at certain situations and all, you might have like 100 200 files within a folder. So how do you work in those kind of situation is something you can explain to the interviewer. Okay, so let's see an example here. Okay, so I will just have this just for readability. So I can use a traditional for loop to loop through each and every file in my folder. Okay, for say for file in, for now I'm just gonna read two files. Okay, just for this demo purpose I'm just gonna read these two files. So this is my very first file. Okay, so this is my very first file. And I have another second file too. Okay, so if I go to the folder, I have another file called Python intro. It's again the same content only I have, but it's nevertheless it's a different file. Okay, our ultimate purpose is to read these multiple two files and read the contents of it. Okay, so I'm just copying pasting it. What mistake am I making? Yeah. Python intro is my file. Okay, so these are the two files. I'm providing an alias as usual as f. Now I have just looping through each and every files, but I have not opened. Like in our previous example we used with open. So what is my file? It's my file parameters file. I am reading it in, I'm using read mode, so I'm providing R as a parameter. What mistake am I missing? Okay, so this is just reading a file, so I'm not gonna provide the alias here. I need to provide it here only. Right, CF for line in F. So I'm using another nested loop. I'm using another nested for loop to loop through each and every line. Okay, now print line dot strip. Okay, so just to go through this code, what I'm doing is I'm just using a traditional for loop to loop through each and every file. Okay, here I have two different files, right? I've just provided two different files, and as usual I've used that open function and providing my file, right? And I'm using another nested for loop to loop through each and every line in my file. Okay, so now let me run this. You can see it read contents from two files. So here is the content from first file. Okay, it ended here. The second content from the second file started here. Okay, so this is how you will read content from multiple files. Okay, but the catch here is this is a very traditional way of working with multiple files. Okay, but there is a more efficient way as well. So interviewer will be much more impressed if you give that answer as an answer to the question. Okay, so here this is a very easiest and efficient way only, but still there's another efficient way that you can do. Okay, so only reason is because you are using multiple nested for loop here, which is literally very confusing. whenever the lines are very huge, it will be very difficult for you to follow with this approach. So there's another inbuilt module that you can use to solve this problem. Okay, so let me remove this. There is something called file input. Okay, we need, this is an inbuilt module present in Python. Okay, to work with this files. So all I need to do is I'm importing this file input module. Okay, with I'm just providing an alias called file input fi. Okay, and then all you need to do is with fi dot, I'm using the input module. So what are my parameters? Files equal to all I need to do is, again I need to provide these two parameters, like these two file parameters. Right, this is again very similar to the previous example what we saw, but we are using a file input module here. Right, and this is my second file, intro. Right, as f, and then as usual I'm trying to loop through each and every line. For line in f, print line dot strip. Okay, now let me run this. All right, here it is. So it again read the contents from the two files. Okay, so this is my content of my first file up to here, and here is the content from my second file. Okay, so this way, by using file input module, this is a very inbuilt module in Python, so you do not need to download and all, it is already inbuilt. So this way you can read multiple files, and you can also read contents from these files very easily, and this is very efficient too. Okay, so if you give this answer to your interviewer, I think he or she will be very much impressed. And yeah, that's all what I want to cover as part of this file reading interview question. I hope you really understood the details behind how to read the contents of a text file. If you have any questions regarding this, please let me know in the comment section. I'll try to answer it as soon as possible. In case if you like this video, please subscribe and follow my channel. Thank you.